Every evening, 6 o'clock, exactly. Not 5:59, not 6:01. And every evening, the smell comes back. Lavender, beeswax, my mother's hand cream. My mother, who has been dead for 8 months. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened at Wrenfield Manor. I am not a woman who believes in ghosts. I balance a checkbook. I triple-check smoke detectors. I do not light candles for dead relatives, but for 3 weeks in October, I stood at the edge of a hedge maze every single evening, waiting for a smell that should not exist, and I let it pull my family in deeper each time. That's the part I can't forgive myself for yet. Not the smell, the waiting. My name is Sabrina Locke. My husband, Mark, found the listing 2 months after my mother's funeral. An old stone manor in rural Vermont, boxwood hedges, a private lake. A listing that used words like restorative and away from it all. He didn't say the word grief. He never does. He just showed me the photos on his phone at 11 at night. The way you'd show someone a peace offering. Our son, Emmett, was 10, our daughter, Lily, was 7. Lily still asked, some mornings, if Nana was coming to visit. I thought 3 weeks in the mountains might be the thing that finally let all 4 of us breathe at the same time. I was wrong about what kind of breathing this house wanted from us. The drive up took 4.5 hours, and the manor came into view the way old houses do, all at once, past a bend in the road, like it had been waiting there the whole time and simply hadn't bothered to announce itself. Wrenfield Manor. Grey stone, ivy climbing one whole wing, windows that caught the last orange light of the afternoon and held it like something private. Behind the house, past a low stone wall, I saw the top edges of hedges, taller than a grown man, cut into shapes that didn't quite make sense from that angle. A maze. The listing hadn't shown a single photo of it. The caretaker met us in the gravel drive. Thomas Aldrich, early 60s, flannel jacket. Hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime doing outdoor work nobody thanked him for. He gave us the keys, walked us through the water heater and the fuse box, told us where the good firewood was stacked. Then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned the maze. Boxwood labyrinths original to the house, he said, older than the stone. If you believe the local stories, kids love it. Just keep an eye on the time out there. Hedges don't light themselves, and it gets dark quicker than you'd think. This deep in the valley. I asked him what he meant by keep an eye on the time. He looked at Mark, then at me, and said, you'll understand by the second evening, and got into his truck before I could ask what that meant. If you're the kind of person who likes stories that sit in your chest a little too long after the video ends, this is a good moment to subscribe to Eerie Atmos X, because what happened over those 3 weeks still sits in mine. The first evening was ordinary, almost aggressively ordinary, the way a house tries too hard to seem fine. We unpacked, Mark made a fire. Emmett found a stack of board games in a hall closet with a missing piece in every box, which he considered a personal insult. Lily wandered the downstairs rooms touching things, a brass clock, a velvet curtain, the corner of a dining table big enough for 14 people who clearly hadn't sat there in years. At 5:45, I stepped onto the back terrace with a glass of wine, mostly to look at the maze in the fading light. The hedges were dense, dark green going to black as the sun dropped, and from the terrace I could just make out the low stone archway that marked the entrance. At 6 o'clock, exactly, a breeze moved through the terrace, and in it, for maybe 4 seconds, I smelled lavender and beeswax, the specific, particular smell of my mother's hands when she used to hold my face in them. I stood very still. The wine glass shook slightly against my ring, then it was gone, and it was just cut grass and wood smoke again. And I told myself it was some flowering plant along the wall, and I went inside and didn't mention it to Mark. The second evening, Lily mentioned it first. We were setting the table, and she stopped, sniffed the air like a small dog catching a scent, and said, "Nana's here." Mark laughed, the easy laugh parents use to defuse things they don't understand yet, and said, "Nana's not here, sweetheart." Nana's. He stopped himself before he said the word dead in front of a 7-year-old, and instead said, "Nana's not here." "She is," Lily said, entirely unbothered, already walking toward the back door. "She smells like the maze." I felt something cold move down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I followed her to the terrace. It was 5:58. At 6 o'clock, the breeze came again, and this time I wasn't alone in noticing it. Mark stopped talking mid-sentence. Emmett looked up from his game. Lavender, beeswax, unmistakable, undiluted, exactly as it had been in my mother's kitchen for 40 years. "You smell that?" I said to Mark. It wasn't a question. He nodded slowly. And for the first time since we'd arrived, I saw something uncertain move across his face. Some kind of flower, maybe. Something in the hedges. "Boxwood doesn't smell like lavender, Mark." "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." Here's the thing about grief. If you've lived through it, it makes you generous with your own disbelief. You want so badly for the impossible thing to be true that you build little bridges of logic to walk yourself across. Maybe there was a lavender bush somewhere near the maze entrance, blooming out of season. Maybe the caretaker used a specific hand soap that carried on the wind. Maybe. I built 4 or 5 of those bridges that first week, and I crossed every single one of them gladly, because the alternative, that my dead mother's specific, singular sense was arriving at exactly 6 o'clock every evening from the direction of a 100-year-old hedge maze, was not a thought I had anywhere to put. On the 3rd evening, Emmett found something. He'd wandered toward the maze entrance around 5:30, technically against the rule we'd set that first night. No maze without an adult. And he came back at 6:05 holding something small in his fist, his face unreadable in the way only a 10-year-old's face can be when he's decided not to tell you everything. It was a hairpin, tortoiseshell, old-fashioned, the kind my mother used to pin her hair back with every single day of her life. A specific style I hadn't seen anyone else wear in 30 years. "Where did you get this?" I asked, and my voice came out flatter and harder than I meant it to. "Just inside," he said. "On the ground, right past the arch. Was anyone in there?" He hesitated. That hesitation is a thing I've replayed 100 times since. "I heard someone humming," he said. "Nana used to hum that song. The one about the garden." I hadn't heard that song in 8 months. I hadn't told my children about it in years. There was no possible way for my 10-year-old son to know what tune his grandmother hummed while she gardened, unless he had, in fact, heard it. That night I lay awake next to Mark and told him about the hairpin. He turned it over in his hands under the lamplight, and I watched the same generous disbelief I'd been running on all week finally start to crack in him too. "Old houses have old junk everywhere," he said, "but it came out thin. It's a hairpin, Mark. I'd know it anywhere. Or it's a hairpin like hers. They made thousands of those, and the humming. He didn't have a bridge built for that one. Neither did I." The next morning, I asked Thomas Aldrich about the maze's history when he came by to check the boiler. He didn't seem surprised by the question. If anything, he seemed like he'd been waiting for it. "Family before you stayed the full 6 weeks," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, not quite looking at me. "Young couple. Lost their son the year before. They said they heard him in there, laughing, they said. Right around 6 every night. What happened to them? They left early. Wife wanted to stay. Husband didn't. That's usually how it goes." He paused. "Manors had renters like you for going on 15 years. Ma'am, every family that stays past a week or 2, they've usually lost somebody recent. And every one of them says the same thing about 6 o'clock. Why didn't you tell us that before we booked?" He looked at me then, properly, for the first time since we'd arrived. "Would it have changed your mind?" I didn't have an answer for that either, and I think we both knew it wouldn't have. For the rest of that week, we tried to make a rule out of it. The way you make a rule out of anything you don't understand and don't want to lose. No maze after 5:30. No maze alone. If we smelled her, we'd acknowledge it, sit with it for those 4 seconds, and then go on with dinner. Like grief was a weather pattern we could simply dress for. It worked, for a while, or it seemed to. That's the false relief part. The part where you think you've found the boundary of the thing, and it turns out you've only found the boundary of what it wants you to see yet. Lily started drawing pictures of the maze at bedtime. Every drawing had a small figure standing at the center of it. She said it was Nana. Waiting for what? I asked her once, trying to keep my voice light. "For us to come find her," Lily said. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She doesn't like being alone in there. On the 6th night, unable to sleep, I took my laptop down to the kitchen and did the thing I probably should have done before we ever signed the rental agreement. I searched the manor's name, alongside words like history and deaths and hauntings. And mostly I found nothing. Old real estate listings. A decade-old article about the original family who built the place in the 1890s. A paragraph about a fire in the West Wing that had been rebuilt twice. But 3 pages deep, I found a message board post from 4 years earlier. In a forum for vacation rental reviews, buried under complaints about parking and Wi-Fi speed, a woman named Carol had written to long paragraphs about staying at Wrenfield with her husband the autumn after they lost their daughter to illness, and how, every evening, right around 6, she swore she could smell her daughter's shampoo drifting in from the garden. She'd written that she almost didn't post it, worried people would think she was unwell with grief, but she wanted some record of it to exist somewhere, in case anyone else ever searched the way I had just searched. There were 9 replies. 4 of them were strangers telling Carol she needed grief counseling. 3 were people simply saying they believed her. The last 2 were from other renters, describing the exact same 6 o'clock scent, tied to a different lost person each time. A father, a twin brother, as if the manor kept no particular loyalty to any one kind of grief, only to the shape grief left behind in a person. I closed the laptop at almost 3 in the morning and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. And I understood, in a way I hadn't let myself understand yet, that we were not the first family this had happened to, and we would very likely not be the last, and that nobody who had written about it seemed to have found a way to make it stop except leaving. I told Mark about Carol's post over coffee the next morning. He read it twice, jaw tight, and then did something I hadn't expected. He laughed, short and humorless. 9 replies in 4 years, he said. Nobody warns anyone. Nobody shuts this place down. They just quietly let people book it and hope for the best. Maybe nobody believes it's real enough to fight the caretaker about, I said. Or maybe they do, and it doesn't matter, because the house always finds somebody new who needs to believe it badly enough to stay anyway. We looked at each other across the kitchen table, and I think that was the exact moment we should have packed the car. I think, if I'm honest, some small, hard, self-protective part of both of us already understood everything we needed to understand. We stayed anyway. Lily was drawing that same figure at the center of the maze every single night by then, and some part of me had started, quietly, to want to know what she looked like up close. By the second week, the scent had changed. It wasn't only lavender and beeswax anymore. Underneath it, faint but growing, there was something colder. Wet stone, old water, the smell of a well or a cellar, something underground and untouched by light in a long time. Mark noticed it before I did. He didn't sleep well those nights. I'd wake at 2, 3 in the morning and find him standing at the bedroom window, looking down at the dark shape of the maze against the tree line. You feel it too, I said one night. Not really a question. I keep thinking I hear something, he said, under the humming, like something's answering it. Neither of us said the word out loud yet. We were still a family that needed a bridge to cross before we'd admit what we already suspected. That whatever was in that maze wasn't only offering us my mother's scent out of kindness. I started noticing smaller things too. The kind of details that don't mean anything alone, but stack up into something heavier together. The hedges nearest the archway seemed to grow a few inches every few days, though Thomas swore he hadn't trimmed them and had no plans to. Birds stopped landing on that section of lawn entirely, even though the rest of the property was loud with them from sunrise on. And Lily's drawings kept changing, the figure at the center of the maze getting more detailed each night, more finished, as though she was sketching from memory rather than imagination, adding a hairpin, then a house dress, then, on the 12th night, small delicate hands reaching toward the edge of the page, like she were trying to draw them out of the paper entirely. I took a photograph of one drawing and sent it to my sister, who had loved our mother just as fiercely as I had, without any context at all, just to see her reaction. She called me within 2 minutes, her voice tight. Why does that look exactly like Mom's hands? She said. Sabrina, why does a 7-year-old's crayon drawing look exactly like Mom's hands? I didn't have a bridge for that conversation either. I told her it was probably nothing. The way you tell someone something is probably nothing when you've already stopped believing it yourself. It was Emmett who broke the rule again. On the 14th night, he'd been quieter than usual all day. The particular quiet of a child carrying something he's decided is alone to carry. At 5:47, I realized he wasn't in the house. I found Mark first, and together we ran the length of the back lawn, past the terrace, toward the stone archway, and the last of the daylight was already thinning into that deep blue that comes right before true dark. Emmett. I screamed his name into the hedges, and the hedges swallowed it whole. No echo, nothing. Like the sound had simply stopped existing 3 feet past my mouth. At 5:58, we reached the archway. Mark wanted to go in immediately. I grabbed his arm. If it's 6 o'clock rules and they're the same as out here, I said. We need to know what we're walking toward before we lose the only advantage we understand. It was the coldest, most calculated sentence I have ever said out loud about my own son, and I still don't know if it was the right one. At 6 o'clock exactly, the scent hit us both at once, so strong it was almost a physical pressure against the face. Lavender, beeswax, and underneath it now, unmistakably, the cold wet stone smell, stronger than either of us had ever felt it. And from somewhere deep inside the maze, we heard Emmett laugh. Not scream, not cry out, laugh, the easy, unguarded laugh of a child who is having a wonderful time with someone he loves and trusts completely. Marmy, Nana's showing me the middle part, his voice, faint, delighted, folding back on itself between hedge walls that seemed, in that moment, to go on forever in every direction. Mark was already running into the maze before I could stop him. I went in right behind him, my heart doing something violent and rhythmic in my chest, and the moment we crossed under that stone archway, the temperature dropped 10 degrees in a single step. The hedges inside were taller than they'd looked from the terrace, taller than any hedge has a right to grow, dense enough that no light came through them at all, and the paths didn't match any layout a maze should logically have, turns that folded back on themselves, corridors that seemed to lengthen the longer we ran down them. We called Emmett's name over and over. Sometimes his laugh answered, always from a different direction than the one we were running toward. Mark hit a dead end and turned back the wrong way at a fork, and I lost sight of him for almost a full minute in that green-black corridor, and I understood, with a clarity that still visits me at 3 in the morning sometimes, that this maze did not want to be solved by 2 panicking adults. It wanted to be entered by 1. I found Mark again at a junction where 4 paths met, and directly ahead of us, at the end of one corridor, we saw the center of the maze for the first time. A small stone courtyard, open to the sky, with a single dead tree at its heart, black branches against the darkening blue above, and standing beneath the tree, holding Emmett's hand, was a woman in a pale house dress, her hair pinned back with a tortoiseshell clip, humming a tune about a garden. She did not look exactly like my mother. She looked like my mother the way a photograph left along in water looks like the person it once held. The shape was right, the details slightly dissolved, the eyes wrong in a way I felt in my stomach before my mind could name it. Emmett, come here, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, because some animal part of me understood that whatever this was, it would feed on my fear as readily as it fed on my grief. Emmett looked at me, confused, entirely unafraid. Nana wants to show us the well, he said. She says it doesn't hurt if you already know someone down there. The woman under the tree turned her head toward me for the first time, and smiled with my mother's exact smile, and said, in my mother's exact voice, I've missed you so much, sweetheart. Come see what I found. Every instinct I have ever had about my own mother's love told me to walk forward. Every instinct I had built in the last 2 weeks, watching a scent turn into a sound, turn into a shape, told me that walking forward was the one thing I could not do. I have to stop here for a second and ask you something, because I still don't know the answer myself. If you'd been standing where I was standing, looking at something wearing your mother's face and speaking in her exact voice, holding your son's hand 30 feet from a world you'd never seen before that night, would you have known, in that moment, which version of love was the real one? I chose not to move toward her. Instead I said Emmett's name a second time, gently, the way you'd call a sleepwalker back without startling him into falling. He blinked, like something in him surfaced from very deep water, and let go of her hand the moment his fingers left hers. The woman's smile didn't fade so much as it simply stopped being held up by anything underneath it, and for half a second I saw something in that face that had never belonged to my mother at all, hollow, patient, endlessly old. Then the dead tree's branches moved, though there was no wind, and the courtyard went dark all at once, the way a room goes dark when someone you can't see reaches for the switch. We ran. I don't remember most of it. I remember Mark's hand crushing mine, Emmett's small body wedged between us, the hedges seeming to open a corridor for us that hadn't been there on the way in, almost as if it wanted us out as badly as we wanted to leave. We came through the stone archway at 6:14 and collapsed onto the terrace grass, all 3 of us breathing like we'd run 4 miles instead of minutes. Lily was standing at the back door, watching us, entirely calm. You found her, she said. It wasn't a question. She likes it better when there's more of us. We didn't sleep that night. Mark called Thomas Aldrich at 7 the next morning and told him we were leaving. Thomas didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "Most do, eventually. Drive safe." And I understood, from an exhausted patience in his voice, that this was a conversation he had given more than once. We packed in under an hour. Emmett didn't want to talk about the woman under the tree. Lily kept asking when we'd come back to visit Nana. I want to tell you we left and everything was fine. That the manor and the maze and the smell of lavender stayed behind us on that gravel drive the way bad memories are supposed to. If you've made it this far into the story, I genuinely love to know what you would have done differently. So drop it in the comments. Would you have walked toward that voice, or away from it, the way I did? And if a story like this got under your skin, the way it got under mine, send it to somebody who still believes they'd never fall for it. Here's what actually happened. We drove 4.5 hours home in near silence. We unpacked. We went back to school, back to work, back to the version of normal we'd been trying to find in Vermont in the first place. And 3 nights ago, at exactly 6 o'clock, Lily walked into the kitchen while I was making dinner, stopped, sniffed the air, and smiled a specific, quiet smile of a child who has just been reassured of something. "Nana came to visit," she said, and went back to the living room to keep drawing. I stood very still at the stove. I did not smell anything. Mark, across the room, said he didn't smell anything either. But Lily still does, every evening. 6 o'clock. Exactly, and every time. When I ask her what Nana says, she gives me the same answer, gentle and untroubled. The answer I haven't been able to stop hearing since. She says she's still waiting for the rest of us.